Hello guys, how are you? This is Chris AD again with another video, and today's video is a bit different. I'm going to show you guys how I do IC swap on screens, and actually without damaging this screen. So this screen has actually two lines, a pink line and a white line. We're going to send this in for line repair. However, we are replacing this screen for another customer and they do not want the message. So what we're going to do is we're going to salvage this IC right here, and we're gonna try to conserve the screen so we can install a new IC on there. I'm gonna show you guys step by step how I remove this IC, one, and then two, how I rebuild this IC. And this is without grinding the chip or anything. It's just pretty much heat extraction. So let's go ahead and first turn on our quick 861DW, set it up at 250, and I'm gonna drop it down to like 40 degrees. Sorry, not 40 degrees, 40 airflow, just because I do not want to apply too much air on this one. And obviously the 250 just so I can remove the underfill around the IC and stuff. Now first things first, we do have to remove this cable. Now I lift it up from here, right? Now we do have to warm up this area, so we can actually lift up the cable as even and as easily as we can. We are gonna also use some ISO just so we can make it a bit smoother. And what we're gonna be using, I like to use these plastic, thin plastic cards right there. You can cut it however you like. Pull up some stuff. All right, now needs a little bit warmed up. So it is at a low airflow. I have it set at 40, so it should not burn the polarizer or anything, so it should be good to go now. Grab this card, put some alcohol on there, put a bit of alcohol right here, then insert your card, and you want to try to insert it as evenly as possible and as flush as you can, right? And the reason why you want to do this is because you don't want to put too much bend in the flex. One, because you want to be able to have the surface smooth and it's not warped, so when you install the new IC it sits flush. And second of all, we do not want to damage that cable, right? Because then we won't be able to send it to have that line repair and we lose the money on it. So now that we loosened it up, right, now you can see that it is moving up and down. We're not gonna move it up too much, right? What we are gonna do, we are gonna put in these metal shields. Now, where did I get this metal shield, you might ask? These metal shields are actually present on the iPhone XR motherboards. It's right on top of the CPU shield. It has that copper shield that's an extra layer on there. So what I like to do is I like to salvage them and use them as heat dissipating shields pretty much. Now, and it's very thin, as you guys can see. It's very good to slide it right under here, right? You do not want to push it all the way down. You just want to push it in enough so where it covers the area under the IC, and that's pretty much it, right? Now, we ideally want to secure that screen on there, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pause the video real quick. I'm gonna get my other tool, right? And then I'll resume it. Alrighty guys, now I got this, right? So this, we actually use it for the back glass, but it actually works pretty well with what we are doing. So what we are gonna do, we're gonna set the screen in there. The reason why we're gonna set the screen in there is because we do not want it to move while we are removing the IC, right? Because we have to clear the underfill, and it's gonna be a bit of a problem if the screen is moving left and right, correct? So let's make sure that it is locked in. We are gonna bump up the the temperature just a little to 270. and then we'll see how that works, and if we have to bump it up from there, we'll bump it up a little more. So first things first, let me find my Keon Lee underfill remover, which is gonna be the R numbered, right? So it's gonna be the 007. This is called the glue remover, if I'm not mistaken, and it's number 007, like 007. So without further ado, let's warm up our hot air gun real quick. So also, just a quick side note, I've probably mentioned it in other videos as well. So when you actually turn on the hot air, it doesn't automatically reach the set temperature that it's set to. It might reach it on the core itself, right? But as airflow is traveling, it's gonna get a little cooler. So it might show 270 right there, but it's gonna probably take a few more seconds or a minute to get to 270 on the nozzle itself, because it has to warm up the nozzle, it has to warm up all that stuff. So now we can go ahead, and if you guys can see, I'm orienting the air towards the metal shield, right? And the reason why we don't want to apply it this way, because the cable sits right underneath. So we're just gonna go ahead and try to remove this underfill right there. We're gonna gently scrub it off, right? We're not gonna apply pressure because we do not want to damage that cable. You're gonna have to gently scrub it off. And the reason why you have to scrub it off, right? If you're lifting that IC, it's gonna lift up all the black coating on that cable, and then you're gonna have to mask it, and it's gonna be a whole nother show to mask all the pads. Then you know, you gotta clear up the pads themselves from the UV mask. It's gonna take forever. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try as much as we can to not clear up, to not lift up that black coat right there that sits on the screen, on the flex of that screen. So it makes to replacing that chip faster, right? Without having to do extra stuff. Now now that we removed the underfill, we're gonna bump up the temperature to 330, and we're gonna bump up the heat to, not the heat, I mean the airflow to 50, right? Now, it is a bit risky doing that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add in the bigger copper plate instead of this one, right? So now that we removed the underfill, we can go ahead and insert the other one and then just lift it up. I like to use the bigger one because the temperature, right? So I don't want the temperature to damage the polarizer for one, to damage the screen. So sometimes you do have this thing to lift up, so just try to remove it. Doesn't really matter how pretty it looks, because this is on the back and nobody's gonna see it. So we are gonna insert this, right? But you do not want to insert it deep again. You just want to insert it up to the IC itself, and then you direct the airflow away from the cable on the bottom towards the shield, right? So now that we have the shield inserted, we're just gonna use the airflow. We're gonna move it back and forth like this, right? And then with my 007, I'm gently trying to go under the IC, right? I'm trying to gently go under the IC because there is underfill under the IC as well. And I do not want to scratch the layer underneath. Look at that. As you guys can see, all the pads are still there, the code is still there, and it's gonna be very easy for us to install a new IC. Now I'm gonna remove this shield again, and I'm gonna place my other one again, right? Because now that I don't want this much temperature, I can drop my temp right there, and I can use a smaller shield. It's lesser pressure on the cable, and I don't have to worry about damaging that flex. We're not gonna flex it too much anymore. So we're gonna put this IC here on the side because we are gonna put it on another screen for another customer. And then I'm gonna show you guys how we clean it. We're gonna re-weld that IC in a second. First, I like to clean this area, right? Now cleaning it, we already removed the underfill on the sides right here, and it seemed like this cable had all the underfill stuck to the IC itself, and it's pretty clean right there. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna add some flux, correct? We're gonna add a generous portion of flux right there. Then we're gonna grab our soldering iron that's set to 700 and if I'm not mistaken 50 or 700, yeah, 750, and we're gonna use our just standard solder wire. Okay, and then we're gonna add a blob right there to the iron itself, and then we're just gonna rub the pads as gently as possible, right, without making any pressure. You're just gonna let the solder blob do its job without actually making pressure to the surface itself. Now that we did a gentle scrub right there, what it did is actually cushioned up the pads because they were kind of oxidized and flat under that IC. So now it made a gentle cushion right there, and if there was any small underfill pieces on there, the solder is gonna be above it. So when you put that new IC, it's gonna set down perfectly fine. I do not suggest wicking it. You want to wick it, you can. I do not suggest wicking it at all, as there is no reason for you to wick it whatsoever. All right. So I am gonna gently clean up this the pads right there. As you can see, the cable is not moving. What's barely moving at all, because I am not applying pressure. I'm just letting the friction and alcohol with this clean cloth right there do its job, right? Cleaning it up pretty well. As you guys can see, the pads should be a little shiny. Let me see if I can zoom in. Might not be showing too much on the camera, but I promise you they are a bit, they are cushiony and they are silver and shiny. So let's go ahead and move this to the side. Let's grab what we need to do our chip reball. So I'm actually gonna get another chip that I'm gonna remove real quick from another bad screen, just so I can show you the whole process, just so I can show you that how it works, and it still works, and it only shows these two lines that were present earlier. So let's grab another screen real quick. So I don't really care about the screen much. It is a 13 Pro, this is a 13 Pro Max. This chip, it is the same, right? It should not give any issues, it is the same. I am gonna remove it with just like this. I'm not gonna shield it out because it is a bad screen. So I'm not really worried about damaging it or anything, right? And I don't care if I scratch up the coat on this one or anything, because I'm not too concerned about that screen at all. One might say, oh, but what about the flex? You can salvage the flex and stuff. I have too many of these screens and I don't really do flex repair, so I'm not really too worried whether I damage it or not. The only thing that I would care about is basically the connector right here, and I can salvage that, so I'm not too worried. Alright, now that we removed the IC, put it to the side, remove that screen. Let's get our IC cleaning tool. I like to call the IC cleaning tool because you can hold the IC in there and it won't move, and you can clean it. So we're gonna set this up right here. Also, you have to work with your comfort. You're not gonna care about what's the orientation of this. As long as you're comfortable, this is what matters. So we're gonna add in some flux to that, right? First things first, it does have underfill. So what I like to do is I like to drop the temperature of these balls even more. So I add um, more solder to it, right? So same job, same concept. We put a solder blob on the iron itself, and then we just gently rub the pads with the ball itself. You see, I'm not sure if it shows in the videos, but you can see that it is getting silver and such. So now this type of IC, the coating on there is pretty rigid, so it doesn't matter if you rub the wick on there, it's not gonna scratch the coat as long as you rub it for the exact uh, point to where you're actually rubbing off the underfill and not the actual clear coat. Not the clear coat, I mean the coat that they put around the pads, right? So we're just gonna gently rub it. So you see how I'm not rubbing it with the iron itself, I'm rubbing it with the wick, and the iron is just the thing that's moving the wick, right? So you want to occasionally move the soldering iron to you're gonna move it down on the wick, because the wick will get black and it's just not gonna hold the solder anymore, right? So now that you guys can see the flux is turning black, it is because of the heat, but it's okay. We can kind of tell without a scope that the underfill is clean, right? So if you feel more comfortable, I suggest you do it with a scope. I am pretty much used to it, to not needing a scope, because I can tell just by looking at it. Let's go ahead and clean up this black flux, burnt flux. I like to use a brush here because it is gonna be a little gooey and it's not gonna clean as easy with a cloth. Then after I do this, I'll just use the cloth afterwards. Now, for the reballing purpose, for the reballing part, let's remove the IC first. Let's clean up these real quick right here. The flux that stays from having it inside of the holder, it assembles on the sides, right? And when you're rubbing it with the cloth or when you're brushing it, they don't really get removed, right? So if you just use a blade or anything, I like to use my nail. I mean, it is a little nasty, but it's okay. All right, now reballing the chip, right? So there are two methods, or well, two stencils that I like to use to reball this chip. You have the, let's put the chip on the side right here. You have the Amoi, or I don't know how it's pronounced, you know, don't judge me. This is a magnetic base, right? This stencil is magnetic, and it's designed for the Extra 12, 12 Pro Max, 13, and 14. You put the chip in the associated spot, you drop down the chip, you apply the flux, you apply the paste, sorry, you hold it with the tweezers, heat it up, done. This is the easiest method. And then if you don't have this stencil and you just have a regular stencil, I'm gonna explain to you guys how it's done with the other stencil, since I am not using a scope. And I actually failed doing it without a scope for some reason, and it only happens when I'm on camera. But it's okay. I'm gonna explain to you guys, and then we'll just get back to this jig because I'm doing it without a scope again. So what I like to do is I like to grab a paper towel, right? This has been used because I like to keep it. That's the one I used to reball. Like this orange stuff right here, this is like heat marks. So what I like to do is I like to double it, right? Fold it. Just put the IC in a spot to where you like, right? And then you can set up the stencil above it. Now, why do you put a paper towel, you might ask? It's because so the IC can sink inside of the paper towel, and then you can apply pressure to the stencil, right, on the sides, and then the stencil will not warp, because the IC is a little thicker than like an audio IC, for example, right? This IC, it's about twice the thickness. So the stencil will bow like this, and then you're gonna have the center is gonna be more elevated than the sides. So when you're putting in your paste, your balls are gonna be uneven. The middle is gonna be elevated and the sides are gonna be shorter. You're gonna put in the IC, you're gonna run out with like green lines, no touch, or if the screen turns on at all. So then you put in the paste, right? You hold it with the tweezers, you heat up, and you also need that paper towel. And what it does is, instead of the edges bowing down, it's gonna bow up, which is gonna leave you with a flatter area right there. Because if it bows down, what's gonna happen is gonna elevate the center. Again, even though you're holding with the tweezer, it's gonna elevate the center. As you can see, it's elevated because I'm applying pressure down, right, on the edges. And if I push down right here, it's gonna push down, right? This is not what you want. But if you're holding it and then it bows up, your tweezers are still applying that pressure downwards, because the stencil itself is applying the pressure downwards on the center as well, because it's the edges that are bowing up. So let's go ahead and get to our other stencil, because for the sake of the video and the simplicity of this video, and for me not getting pissed off, because it almost always works with me without a scope, but for some reason today I tried it and it does not want to work. It's just one of those days. So make sure your stencil is clean, set it down in the associated spot. It is magnetic, so make sure it is lined up. And then we're gonna use the 183 degrees Celsius paste. Right now, I like to have the paste dry or wet. Now, I like the dry. I like to the excess paste. I like to keep it on the top. So when it over time, it's gonna dry up, and then I can use dry paste when I need to, and then the wet paste is in the bottom. So we're gonna go ahead and grab dry paste for now. I like to use dry paste for this application. Ignore the phone ringing in the background. I apologize. It's after hours, so should have muted it, but it's okay. Right now I've applied this paste. What I like to do is, for it to make it even, what I like to do is I like to grab another useless stencil that I don't really use, and I like to rub out the excess. And what this does, it creates a flat, it flattens out the pads, the paste, and when you heat it up, right, and the balls form, they're gonna be very even. I like to use this method anytime I reball, so my reball comes perfect. Now, when you're heating up, you always wanna heat up in a circular motion and in a little bit of wider range than the IC, because you wanna warm up the whole stencil. When the flux is gonna start bubbling up, it's not gonna bubble up in one space and then start moving to the other and dragging all the paste with it. You're warming up the whole stencil evenly, and then once you can see that the solder is almost ready to start forming, what I like to do is I like to grab it on one side right like that, and then just go back and forth, right? It is gonna be a little harder in this stencil because it is gonna dissipate the heat, but it's gonna be a bit faster with the other stencil because it doesn't have this assembly. But it looks like our pads are pretty even. Now we can remove the stencil, we can remove the IC. All right, and then what we are gonna do, let's set this far. I will clean this before after I finish this video. I do like to clean immediately. I just want to do the video as fast as I can. So, I'm gonna put some flux. And then I'm gonna heat it up. And why? Because if the stencil was slightly shifted, the balls will fall back in place. And then this is the same flux that I'm gonna use to put this IC back on that screen, right? Because I don't wanna put too much flux on that area. All right, now we need to put back the IC in its place. Now, as you guys can see, there are marks of the old underfill right where we removed it. So this is what I like to use as guiders to put the IC back down. Also, you have to make sure you put back the IC the right orientation. Normally the Apple logo is going to be always facing the right direction, correct? The Apple logo on the 13 Pro Max and the 14 Pro is going to be on the left side of the IC, and the QR code is going to be on the right. This is for the 13 Pro Max and 13 Pro. It might be similar to other models, but I am not sure. So the Apple logo is always going to be facing the right orientation, which is basically the notch on the Apple to the right, and then you have the piece on the top. I just don't know what it's called. I'm sure someone will tell me later. All right, set up the IC, heat it up. And you guys can see I'm moving it left and left, right, left. And then once it starts falling in place, you can see it move a little, and then you can gently give it a small nudge. All right, now it's done and set in place, and then we can go ahead and test it once it dries. It gets colder. Alrighty, so what I'm gonna use to test this screen now it's all cooled down. I'm gonna use an iCloud motherboard that we have here for parts. I'm gonna connect the screen, and I'm gonna connect my power supply cable, because I don't need the frame, I don't need the power button, nothing. And I can just hit the ground with my tweezers. I can use the SIM tray as ground, and I can find the right pin right here. And then all I have to do is just ground the power pin to the ground, right? And then turn on my power supply. And I can see that it's starting to consume certain amps. Now you're gonna hold it for about 15 to 20 seconds. Once it jumps to like 0.30 amps, you're gonna see an Apple logo. So now you guys can see that the screen is still good. There is no spots on the screen itself. The two lines are still there. And then we're gonna go ahead and test the touch. All right, we're gonna click emergency. It works. Cancel works. So we know that this area of the screen works. The green button works. Star 0 pound 987 654 321. It works. Right now, next thing is what you can do is, if you're testing it inside of the frame, what I suggest that you do is hold the power button with the volume button. Once you see the prompt to turn off, right, you can try to drag it across all the screen to make sure the touch is working. However, I'm pretty confident that the touch is working all over. So because the majority of the area right here works, it means that the majority of this means the screen should be good, right? Normally it will not touch in this area, or like in this area. You get what I mean? It gets divided in half pretty much. So there you guys have it. I hope you guys learned something new today. If I was able to help you with this type of repair, please feel free to subscribe, like, and comment what you feel, or what would you like to see next. Again, my name is Chris AD, and thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully to see you in the next video.